Hi, my name is Felix Matos Rodriguez, and I am the Chancellor of the City University of New York. People who know me call me Felo, and this is my new conversation space on CUNY TV, Café con Felo. Bienvenidos a Café con Felo. My guest today is someone often referred to in the press as the most influential Latino in New York State, budget czar, fiscal whiz, and one of the most powerful officials in state government. He's had a distinguished government career, working for 5 governors and 10 legislative leaders, while commanding respect across the aisle from both Republicans and Democrats for more than 2 decades. Welcome, Robert Mujica. Great to have you here. Full disclosure, Trustee Mujica is also one of our CUNY board members. Most recently, he held the position of New York State Budget Director, but effective January of this year, he assumed the role of Executive Director of PROMESA, Puerto Rico's Financial Oversight and Management Board. The board consists of members appointed by the President of the United States based on recommendations from congressional leaders with the objective of stabilizing the Puerto Rican economy after being in near bankruptcy and to restore economic growth after 4 years of balanced budgets. Brooklyn born, but with Puerto Rico in his heart as the birthplace of his parents, I know that you and I would find a lot of common ground in our conversation. So welcome to our studio, Trustee Mujica. And the first question always in Café con Felo is, how do you take your coffee and how much of it you drink a day?
So thank you very much for the introduction. That's quite an introduction. Chancellor, Fellow. I think you left out also that I'm Brooklyn College alum. So that's
right.
Very important to
Yes.
me. Right? We say that here.
Yep.
And on my coffee, just with a little bit of milk.
A little bit of milk. Excellent.
Just a little milk.
But thank you for making the reference to Brooklyn College because I want to start there. I think many of our CUNY students might not know that you did your undergraduate at Brooklyn College. And I wanted to get a sense of that younger Robert Mujica. Why you went to Brooklyn College, how was your experience there, and how did it shape the rest of your journey in then pursuing studies in government and in law?
Sure. Brooklyn College, I still go back to the days of Brooklyn College even now, even today, with my latest position at the Oversight Board. I remember running around the quad on Brooklyn College and studying in the cafeteria on Brooklyn College. But what it really taught me was the core curriculum at Brooklyn College, which has always been somewhat controversial. If people don't know the core curriculum, they make you take classes in every subject that you may or may not be interested in. But I still that gave me the breadth that I actually use, throughout the rest of my career. I was born in Brooklyn. My parents, came from Puerto Rico to Williamsburg, so I grew up in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn College was actually, a great school, still is, and it also was affordable. So my parents were civil servants at the time. Brooklyn College was affordable and kind of was the launching pad for me. And now I'm at the Oversight Board. I still am relying on some of the classes I took in Puerto Rican studies actually in undergrad at Brooklyn College today, which gave me some of the foundation of, how the island has been treated in the past and how we look forward. So it is still in my heart.
So interesting that at times people say, why are you studying this and why are you doing that? And sometimes it becomes clear as you go in your professional journey. In this case, your work now in Puerto Rico. And, so then from there you went to get a master's in government and then you went to Albany to get your law degree. From the Albany Law School, did you immediately started working in government, or did you work as an attorney in private practice, or how do you begin that transition to your long career in government?
Yeah, so with Brooklyn College, the most fundamental thing I think that taught me, because it carried with me for the rest of my career, was the diversity of the institution and the diversity of both thought. At Brooklyn, you had people from all kinds of ethnic backgrounds, all kinds of economic backgrounds. So from there, I take that, I went to graduate school, I moved to Philadelphia for a little while, then came back. I went straight into working for the New York State Senate after graduate school. And I thought I would be in Albany for a couple of years and then go back to New York City and probably work in the finance sector as a lot of my friends did. I really enjoyed what I was doing. It was really a great opportunity to learn. I was learning. And then I had the opportunity to go to law school while I was working.
Okay.
So I would actually shuttle between office meetings and classes back and forth, for those 3 years. But I did it while I was working. It was hard. But I also worked when I was at Brooklyn College as well, so I was used to it. But it wasn't, it wasn't easy. But I always wanted the law degree to complement my other degrees, because I find in business, government, the lawyers are always arguing with the finance people.
That's
They
right.
always go back and forth. So I wanted to be able to talk
To have that.
both languages.
Nobody questioned that. And, one of the things that's been interesting in your career is, and maybe it's a little bit different now in your role with the Oversight Board, is that although clearly, and particularly in the role of budget director, there's a public side of the work that you did, but you're always sort of being, part of the team of an elected official who's sort of the front of, let it be the Senate or it be the governor. So I was wondering if while you were doing that, you ever consider the idea of yourself being the candidate and running for office in those many years of service, or you were more comfortable with this role of being, a key part of the team now? I mean, with the Oversight Board, you're a bit more of a principal, right? Mm-hmm. But I always wonder if, someone who's been so much tied to politics, did he ever have the urge to run?
Yeah. It is a different thing in the Oversight Board, so you're right. It's a good observation. The answer is no. So I never had an interest. It's come up on occasion. I still don't today. I actually really much enjoyed being the person behind the people that are elected, and always wanted to be behind the scenes. I enjoyed that role. I enjoyed being the staff person. I was always in the room during decisions, but I always remember that, it's the principal that's getting elected. It's the principal that has to be accountable to the people. And my job has always been also to give both sides. And I think that's what I enjoyed the most and over 25 years, right, working for multiple governors, different people in the legislature, I always was able to give them both sides of the argument, try to be intellectually honest, analytically honest, and this is what these people will say, this is what these people will say, and then let them choose. The behind the scenes is really where I think I thrived.
And one thing which I think might be of particular interest, I'm thinking about the students, right, who might be watching the show, is in this time of heavy political polarization, yeah, right, in which finding common ground is so difficult, and different political camps are so entrenched. You have sort of a unique record, particularly in a state like New York that tends to be traditionally blue, or having worked, right, with both Republicans and Democrats, and having people praise your work on both sides. That's, I think, quite unique. And I wonder if there's anything from that experience that you can take and share with people as we move on in, yeah, this era of highly partisan politics and polarization.
Yeah, I think that is something that really, is a little bit frustrating about the dialogue and the discourse today, because what I was able to do over those years is go between both sides. When I worked in the Senate, you had a governor of a different party. When I worked in the governor's office, I had a Senate of a different party. Then I had a Senate of the same party. And my job was always, how do we bridge the gaps? And I think the discourse right now sometimes doesn't allow people to really express and do an intellectually honest analysis of the ideas. There's always going to be difference of opinions, and people have different ideologies. And this is also what I learned, I think, at Brooklyn College, was there was so much diversity on that campus. You learn that there's no one that's absolutely right, and you really have to listen to people to understand where they're coming from. And even in a budget negotiation, when we're trying to close down a budget, in a state like New York, where you have the wealthiest people in the world, you have some of the poorest people, you have the biggest city, and then you have some of the most rural areas. You have to find compromise and balance, and all of those people sitting in all of those chairs have different perspectives. Listening to them, understanding them, and then trying to find common ground is what I was able to do over all of those years by not closing the door to discussion, even when you may disagree, but trying to understand, because you always have to find common ground. It is a luxury to be able to just say, I disagree, and walk away from the table, right? When you're negotiating and you're trying to close a budget, we have to reach a solution every year. So that's not a way you can end. You have to bridge the gap, and you have to find common ground. So that is, I think, it's what we're missing in some of the public dialogue today. And I wish people would just be able to really at least try to understand each other better, because then you can find a path forward.
Well, that might be a great segue to your new role. Talk about trying to find common ground, talking about the need to, at the end of the day, really, agree on a budget and move forward. I mean, all those things that you just mentioned in your commentary, I think apply to this role in the board in Promesa in Puerto Rico, which, it's been highly controversial in some aspects. It comes out of a real deep crisis where there are probably not any straight great answers, right, in terms of moving the country forward. So tell me, A, why was this appealing at this time in your life and your career? And what are your sort of plans and expectations and I know that you're fairly new to the role, but as you navigate this new opportunity?
Yeah. I was a budget director for 7 years, the longest budget director in the last 50 years. The average budget director stays for about 2.5. So I had no intention of jumping into another big role. I was actually thinking it was going to be, on the downside. But I've never shied away from controversial roles if I thought they were important, or a controversial fight if you think it's important. The position on the Promesa board and the Promesa statute is highly controversial, right? And it goes back to a long legacy of the way the government of the United States has impacted the island, inequities, right? I try to stay out of that and just look at, there's the largest bankruptcy, right, in the history of the country occurred there. There's enough blame to go around and a lot of reasons for why it happened. My role there is really limited to what's the future of the island? How do we help to bring the island back so you don't go back, you don't have bankruptcies, you balance budget, and more important, you provide the resources for the people and provide the essential services. I think no matter how you look at it, what happened was the government became unable to provide the essential services for the people when it went bankrupt. It had a burden that was, more than anyone could pay. So as we turn the corner on the board, we move past the bankruptcy. I want to work very closely with the governor and very closely with the legislature. And, I think my background, makes me uniquely situated for that, right? I have close ties to the island my whole life. And then I worked for the legislature for 19 years. I worked for a governor. So I think all of the things that I've learned over that time, right, really help me to kind of, help the government, assist the government, and just be part of the solution going forward. I know it's going to be controversial. It's going to be a rough road. But I think, I've done it in other places before, and I just want to be part of the solution there. It's important for me, and it brings me back to my homeland, which is where, all of my family's from.
One of the end goals is to be able to have those 4 years of balanced budgets as an indication that there's a pattern, right, of sustainability and growth. As you been back to Puerto Rico, and I think, getting acquainted with the situation, and I know that you were connected to Puerto Rico in your previous role. Anything that has surprised you in the sense, either positively or negative, that you thought that it was going to be even more challenging, or that when you went to Puerto Rico said, "Oh, this is in a little better shape than I thought." Anything that you could share of that journey so far?
I've been there 90 days. Short of 90 days. I started in January, but I think you can't just compare Puerto Rico to the United States in all aspects. There are very unique challenges to being on an island, being isolated. There are inequities in laws that treat the island differently. And then there was some mismanagement, and it's an unfortunate reality that we have to deal with going forward. I do think that the people that are the dedicated people that want to work and solve the problem is very encouraging. So many people have reached out and said, how do we help? We want to be part of the solution going forward. And in the end, the answer to moving forward, the board going away, is going to be in the hands of the government. I'm just there to kind of help shine a light on what the issues are. I think we've turned the corner on the bankruptcy parts, and now we can actually focus on how do you invest in the critical institutions of the island. The University of Puerto Rico, which is critically important for the future of the island, the education system, which has not seen outcomes that you would expect, and nothing that would be tolerated right in the states, and economic development, because you can't have jobs, you can't have families staying on the island. People are still continuing to leave the island without an education system that works. But there are a lot of bright spots. If you walk around the island, it's beautiful. There are people in the restaurants. There are cranes going up. The amount of federal money that's important to the island is going to make for sure that the island is going to be able to recover. You just have to make sure we deploy them. But the future of the island is very bright. Is very bright.
No, and I know that before the show began, we were talking about the University of Puerto Rico, and it has the importance, as you say, on the workforce side for sure, right? But as we think also about new thinking that the island will need to be able to have public officials that run things efficiently and without controversy. I mean, that's a mindset in terms of good government, of good policy, and some of that talent is right there at the University of Puerto Rico, then matched with life experience. So I'm happy that you are, thinking about the university as you are in your role as a CUNY trustee. Anything about the role of CUNY trustee? I mean, I'm thinking about that Robert Mujica that was hanging out at the quad of Brooklyn College and now gets to be a trustee. Anything about that journey of being a trustee that you have particularly enjoyed?
Is the opportunity really to give back and to use the skills that I've learned over time to be able to help in the institution. I think CUNY, like higher education across the country, is going through a lot of challenges and changes. And this is just because the future is different than the way it was 40 or 50 years ago when these institutions were structured. So I think being able to, work with you, the other very talented board members, right, to forge a path for the future. There are no simple solutions to some of these very complex problems. Funding is part of the answer, but it's not always the only answer. And sometimes, money papers over problems. Oftentimes. So sometimes you see when there's a lack of funding or something happens, well, all these problems. Well, the problems were there, right? These changes were there, these challenges were there, right? And, when the tide goes back, you start to see, kind of the under. So now I think is the opportunity. My position on the board, and I'm very happy that the governor kept me on the board because CUNY has always been close to my heart. Again, it is my alma mater. And I just want to work forward because I think the future of CUNY and Brooklyn College, it allowed someone like me, right, who couldn't afford, right, to go to most schools, to get an education. And, CUNY is why I'm here today, without a doubt.
And to be in a position to make all these contributions and give back, like you said. And the other thing, as you talk about sort of what's different in the university setting too, is the pace of change. And that is something that we've all sort of navigated, right? What is the impact of artificial intelligence is going to have in the work that we do in the universities? How people see their investment in higher ed. We need to keep reminding them about the benefits of that investment. And I think it's great to have role models like you that they can look and say, that's a path that began at Brooklyn College and something that I can follow. And I think also in Puerto Rico it's phenomenal that a son of the diaspora gets to go back and contribute in such an important position in the PROMESA board. Let me thank you for the conversation and the insights so far, Robert, and all the things about public service, talking about your journey, your sense of giving back and service, your commitment to both the state of New York and Puerto Rico. But we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be taking questions from the CUNY community, and they're going to be coming from students from Brooklyn College. So stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching Café con Felo. My guest today has a stellar record of public service, former New York State Budget Director, and now head of PROMESA, Puerto Rico's Financial Oversight and Management Board. Trustee Robert Mujica. Let's take some questions now from the audience. They all come from your alma mater, Brooklyn College. Let's go for the first question from Isha.
Hello, my name is Isha Abbasi. I'm an accounting major student at Brooklyn College. My question for Mr. Mujica is, what can colleges and schools do differently to teach the next generation proper financial literacy?
Interesting. So on financial literacy, it's something actually I learned in school and at home. And it's really important because without proper financial literacy, you're going to end up in debt, bills you can't afford going forward. CUNY, number one, is a great thing because you can go to the school without having loans.
Yep.
Right? It's critically important. But I think people need to understand that, right? The cost of attendance. We start with higher ed, for example. Too many students are graduating with too much debt. And what that actually means for your finances in the future, most students don't even know, and by the time they know, it's too late. So what the schools can do, I think the core curriculum at Brooklyn was kind of an interesting thing, because I remember in the core you had to learn certain things. Something on financial literacy would probably be great for students because it is something that will pay off really for the rest of students' lives. Understanding that taking on debt, you're going to have to pay that back. Understanding interest rates, understanding the value of purchasing versus borrowing, rent, building up down payments, credit cards, all of that is critically important. It changes your life. And I can say that early on, I was able to, keep costs down, take money, put it away, right? But I wouldn't have been able to do any of that, right, if I had $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 or even more in higher education debt.
And great training to be a budget director.
And great training to be a budget director. That's a good point. That's right.
That's
right.
great. Okay, so the second question comes from Mary.
Hello, I'm Mary Uktum from Brooklyn College and the Graduate Center where I teach economics. I have a question to Robert Mujica. At the time when intergenerational mobility has stalled in the US, CUNY is known to be one of the rare institutions that is contributing to social mobility of the students. Yet this year, all the campuses are facing severe belt tightening. So as a member of the CUNY trustees, my question is, how do you foresee the future of CUNY's historic mission, and what can be done to preserve it?
Yeah. Well, I think CUNY's historic mission on social mobility, right, is the reason I'm here.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll start there, and I think it's still on track. Right. As society changes, and she mentioned, right, the birth rates, there are demographic changes that are happening. The university is going to have to adjust to that. And it's not just those changes, right? When I was budget director, I had to decide between, building a budget is one of building priorities, right? So higher education was one element, and I had to fund lower education, figure out how to fund housing needs, figure out how to fund healthcare and Medicaid, right? All of these things. I'm not budget director anymore. So from a New York perspective, and being on the trustee board, now I can just advocate for CUNY as the most important thing of all of the others. But I think we do have to recognize that reality, that we'd like to put as much money into CUNY as possible, but there are competing priorities in Albany and at the federal level. But CUNY continues to be what it always has been, and I think my role on the board to make sure of that, but I think you're making sure of that, is that mission has not gone away. I think there was recent reports that it is still the university where people go and has the largest impact on social mobility in the country. So I think that mission is there. I think we have to be vigilant to make sure it stays there, make sure it's affordable, make sure students can still go from all backgrounds, and always recognize that this is one priority amongst many, so we have to fight for it.
And I think also the change in education needing more lifelong learning too, that the university needs to be able to continue to meet the needs of its graduates once they leave, because they're going to probably be needing in this high-paced, changing world, they're going to need to retool and come back. And that's something that I think we need to also build in the work that we do. We have a third question, and that's from Raquel.
Hi, my name is Raquel Porteous, and I am a student at Brooklyn College, currently majoring in finance and economics. Hi, Mr. Mujica. I read your bio and it was most impressive. I'm very proud that you're a Brooklyn College alum. My question is two-part. A, I recognize that you completed your sociology degree here and went on to government administration and then ended in law. Question is, how did you successfully transition in the finance space? And B, what advice would you give to your younger self if you had to think about career mobility and getting into the workplace?
So the answer, clearly is I did not pick this trajectory for my career, right? It came to me, and again, I said, you learn the fundamentals of finance, and I went to law, I learned the fundamentals of law, but it was really about building relationships, over the career. And you can be able to move within different sectors. You're not pigeonholed as a finance person or a political person. I think it's just about learning. It was lifelong learning, building relationships with people, and just establishing yourself that you're competent. I got there early in the morning, I left late at night. Right, I did what needs to get done and what the people around me expected of me and wanted of me, and knowing that would launch my career, not any specific studies. Learn as much as you can. Again, I got a master's degree, I got an undergraduate degree, I got a law degree, and then just work hard.
Well, I think that's a great message for all the students, and we wish you very well in this new venture, and for your sake and for all the people of Puerto Rico. So we know that you're going to do a great job. That's all the time that we have. Trustee Mujica, it's been great sitting down with you, and we wish you the very best in your new role back in my island in Puerto Rico. Thank you also for what you share with our viewers. Thank you for watching, and please tune in for Café con Felo on weekends. That's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. on CUNY TV. Saludos.